So when we think of obedience, it raises this question of, is it rooted in a relationship, or is it rooted kind of out as like a transaction with God? So I'm going to kind of unpack that a little bit. The way that we think of the word obey lends itself to a transaction. This command was issued, you do it, you get whatever results. Some of the words that we've looked at kind of really point more to a relational context or a relational understanding of the word obey. If it were simply a transaction, God could be likened to an army general where, he gives a command and you obey it. He doesn't need to know you, doesn't need to know your name if you're like somebody on the field. You don't need to love him to do what he said. He doesn't need to love you, certainly. You are an extension of his will to do the things that he wants to accomplish. And you guys are good. You and the general, you're on good terms as long as you do the things that he said, and that facilitates the most of your relationship with that general in most times. If it's about relationship, he's likened to a kind father, as he is many times in the Bible. He loves you. He wants you to love him. He cares about your heart. He cares about you and what matters to you. And then you, in turn, can care about what matters to him just because it matters to him. People matter to you more because you see his value for them. His word matters to you more because you see his value for it. So here's how this could play out, a transactional versus relationship, to kind of draw the contrast. I don't know if many of you have seen The Chosen. Man, and I were watching it not too long ago. And you've got this scene where Peter's having some relationship issues with his wife, and he's talking to this Roman guard, Gaius, and they're just talking about all kinds of stuff. And Gaius finds out he's got some marriage issues, and he gives him this advice. He's like, get really good at saying these 5 words. You were right, I'm sorry. So then, of course, what does Peter do? He goes home and he tries that, and it doesn't matter if you've seen it or not. Does that work for Peter? No, not at all, right? Who's surprised? This trope is like in TV and movies all the time. And he comes back to Gaius, he's like, hey, I did what you said. It didn't work. Like, you're not as smart as you think you are. The guy self-discloses he's probably not the best person to get relationship advice from. But what happened was Peter tried a transactional solution to a relationship problem. He tried I want this problem to go away, so here's what I need to do. I need to say these 5 words and it goes away. Totally missed the point. And we get this all the time with relationship with God. It's like, if you want this, do this, and you get this. If you want this problem to go away, do X, Y, Z. Saul tried I kind of disobeyed God, but I'm going to try this other stuff to see if I can make this problem go away by applying these things, putting it through the formula, through the machine, and it'll kick out what I want to happen. And I really believe that without an accurate understanding of obedience, like we just talked about, the hearing and obeying, without a relationship with God and being secure with who you are in Christ, you are going to operate out of a transactional relationship with God and his commands. And without a connection to really the heartbeat of the Father, it's really going to be really challenging for you, and you might not even realize it. And it's because the obedience that God desires comes from a place of love. He says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. Now, if you're the transaction person, you see a transaction in this. Okay, if I want it to be true of me that I love God, then I will keep his commands. Plug in X, get Y, I guess, in the equation. And, we'll take a look at John 14. We can pull it up. And I've heard it said that obedience is God's love language. That's how he receives love. Whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. Then Judas, not Judas Iscariot, said, but Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world? Jesus replied, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. These words you hear are not my own. They belong to the Father who sent me. So you see this He's looking for a heart level connection of, if you love me, then of course you'll obey my commands. It's if we tell our kids, if you're part of our family, you do chores. Now, that doesn't mean that they should be doing chores to prove that they're part of our family. It's an identity first. It's a truth that they love our family, they love us, they love each other, and because of that, we work together to do things that need done. It's the same thing here. It's a relational, not a transactional statement. If obedience is coming from some other place than a relationship with God, I don't think it means a whole lot to him. And just to prove that, this is what the Jewish leaders really ran into. If you're traveling with us in the reading plan, not too long ago, we were in Matthew 23, and the section is titled "The Seven Woes of the Teachers of the Law and the Pharisees." And Jesus tears into these guys. He's just like rips them apart, these seven woes, and they're all pointed to the outward actions of these people versus the conditions of their hearts. They were very careful, very meticulous with obeying different parts of the law, but their heart was far from God, and that was his big thing. And they were teaching other people to be as meticulous with what God said with a detached heart. And a transactional approach will look at the later passage in John 15 about abiding, and they'll see a transaction, abide in me and you will bear much fruit. Oh, well, I'd love to bear much fruit, so I guess that means I should abide in Jesus. So then you start abiding because you want to bear fruit. So it shines a light on the heart of, is this relationship with God in service to something else, or is that the end in itself? And everything else works itself out from that place. And you see a lot of transactional encounters with God in the Old Testament. There are tons of examples. The law is highly transactional, and because it was meant to be, and that's how it was made to be. But the value of the New Testament isn't that people who walk with God get better transactions. It's that God removed all of the transactional systems, and the foundation of everything is a relationship with him. He pours his Spirit into people. They live out of a place of love for him and for each other. And you get connected to his heartbeat through that. So, like I was saying, this can really play out in a variety of ways and creep out, and we'll see it when we least expect it. But, you could see it in yourself if you tend to kick up your obedience when you really want something from God. Like, I've got this situation, I want to go this way, I better start obeying God so that he might be inclined to make this thing happen for me. You see that a lot. Maybe you might be inclined to think that God is punishing you for not obeying when bad things happen. I see this all the time. Some terrible life situation, some illness, some loss, some injury. God's just teaching me a lesson because I just don't obey, or because he doesn't want me to be prideful. Do you see the transaction that's hidden in that? Like, I stepped off to the side, I got whacked, and now I have to decide if I'm going to get on the straight and narrow, or if I'm just going to kind of lean into it and just deal with it for a while. I just ask you, where's the love in that? Where's the relationship? How is he just guiding you back with a stick, or is it his voice that you're coming back to, his heart that is leading you, his Spirit that's guiding you? Like I was saying, if you have a transaction-driven obedience kind of framework, you might think that your obedience will get a certain kind of response, and then you get upset when that doesn't happen, of course, because, oh man, I'm obeying God because my life's going to turn around, all these things are going to be just sunshine and rainbows, and then when you find out that if that doesn't happen, it's like, man, I guess I was wrong to obey God, because I plugged these things into this machine and it didn't kick out the things that I was hoping for at the end. And this transactional obedience will be a challenge for you. I know there are plenty of each of these types of people in the room, so I'm speaking to you guys, whether you're a rule breaker or a rule follower. So most people kind of can, at least in different circumstances, figure out kind of where they are. Some people are just in the middle, and God bless you if you are. That's great. But if you're a rule breaker, you will tend to discount how hearing and obeying both displays and affects your relationship with God. I don't need to do anything to prove that I love God. After all, I'm not a legalist. I have grace. And what you'll do is you'll use a version of understanding grace to get yourself off the hook from doing the things that are important to God. If you're a rule follower, you'll tend to feel secure and feel like you've got it all together. I can color in the lines. I can play in this system. So God and I are cool. And the trick is your relationship may be eroding underneath that false sense of security that you're doing the right things. Does that hit home for anybody? Does that make sense? Those two kind of approach. Last thing you want to do is feel justified by your works or justified by your obedience, because I got to tell you, they're not that great, and your works don't impress God that much. He's after your heart. He wants to know that you trust him and you love him. And if you're trying to impress him by doing things, that's a sad game to play. I was listening to a podcast or a sermon, I don't remember, but somebody said, if you want to surprise Jesus or make him say, wow, it's never by the things that you do. You look at the Bible, it says, he was amazed by their great faith. That's what impresses God. Or the other situation I've seen in the Bible, he was amazed that they had no faith. So it's not the things that they did, it was how they responded to him, how much faith that they had. So the last point I'm going to make here is, this question of which has to come first. We're talking about relationship, we're talking about hearing and obeying. They seem almost kind of like they're pulling you in opposite directions. So which comes first, relationship or hearing and obeying? And I honestly don't think that it matters all that much. If you're in a place that you're trying to discover who God is, testing out his words, putting them to practice in your life. You can grow in an understanding of him. You can develop the trust that you have in God by simply living out his words. There's value in that. So that's a good first step, developing trust, getting to know his heart. But also, hearing and obeying needs a relationship, or at least the seeds of a relationship to grow and to have value. So starting with abiding in him, starting with developing that relationship, that connection with him, is also a great place to start. So really, it's kind of like, these two are almost like bike pedals. When you sit down on a bike, you just know which one to press, which one you need to press to start moving. And it's kind of the similar thing. You need both of them working together, or else you're trying to ride a bike with one pedal, just developing your relationship with God, but that never leads you to obey, or you're just obeying and there's no connection with him. You're just doing it because you think there's value in doing that apart from him. But they both strengthen each other. Either one can come first, obedience or relationship. But the thing is, each one must lead to the other to be healthy. If you have a deep, deep relationship with God, but that's not leading to obedience, to treasuring his words in your life, to guarding those, something's going wrong. And similarly, if you're just obeying and living out what God says, you're hearing and you're doing, but that's not strengthening your relationship with him, you're not discovering his heart, you're not drawing closer, then there's something going wrong in that situation too.